Hey guys, LevelCap here. Today is Monday, which means it's time for an episode of Loadout, the series where you guys, the viewers, get to pick a gun and customization for me to use. The way you do that is you leave a comment down below letting me know what kind of weapon and accessories you'd like me to run with, and I will pick one of the top rated comments for the next episode. We're going back to Battlefield 4 today, and our top comment comes from Focus Gaming. London has fallen British forces. The gun will be the AUG A3. Attachments are the ACOG, R2 suppressor, green laser sight, and ergo grip for stability. Secondary is the P226. Attachments are a suppressor and flashlight for that sidearm. Original grenade. Gadget 1 will be the grenade launcher and no gadget for Gadget 2. Knife will be scout. Field upgrade is any of your choice. 5 presidents have been killed. It is your job to kill enemies whilst the United States president is going to safety. Sorry for the spoiler level cap. I hope you use this class next and I hope you agree with it. You're the best. Now, admittedly, I had to rent this movie and check it out because it just looked like over-the-top, insane action, and it totally was. I was not let down. I'm not going to call it a good movie by any means, but it was certainly entertaining. Now, Gerard Butler's character in this movie, who is like the president's chief of security, Mike Banning, just like kills so many people in this movie. It's absolutely insane. Like, there's just action sequences that go on endlessly, and he's not just like mowing them down with like tanks or helicopters. He's like knifing them and like taking them out with pistols or breaking their necks. I looked it up online. Apparently he kills around like 47 people in the movie by himself. This isn't like collateral damage kills or anything, and sorry if I sound giddy while talking about this. You'd kind of understand if you've seen the film, because there's just points where the action is so ridiculous that it's just laughable. Now, the gun I'm using here is actually what the British SAS were using when they came to Mike Banning's aid in the film, and so even though they did some work with it, most of the focus was on Mike Banning himself, who I don't believe actually uses an AUG at any point during the film. Regardless, the moral of that story, I suppose, is don't mess with the US president's chief of security, especially if it's Gerard Butler, as he's good enough to take out about 47 dudes on his own, including vehicles and whatever the heck else you got. I think even like blows up a building towards the end too, so I mean, you know, why not? Now, as far as this loadout goes, I've always enjoyed the AUG. It's kind of hard to mess up the AUG, although I don't know if the ACOG is the right weapon attachment for this assault rifle in this particular case. Battlefield is a cool game, but not necessarily one to represent realistic weapon attachments, especially considering that the damage model and recoil and all that kind of stuff doesn't really align itself too well with optics that are zoomed in for fully automatic rifles. Nonetheless, it does leave us with a very cool looking weapon, and that's something that Battlefield 4 has always done a good job of, is making your guns look badass. Now, what is the AUG known for in Battlefield 4? Well, it's got one of the fastest muzzle velocities in the game at 670 meters per second, making it very good for hitting moving or long range targets. However, we've put the suppressor on here, which greatly reduces the muzzle velocity of any weapon, so it kind of counteracts one of the AUG's best abilities, which is unfortunate. It does look cool, and I'm sure it makes sense in real life to run this weapon with a suppressor in certain situations, but for Battlefield, for the most part, putting a suppressor on this gun doesn't make a huge amount of sense. With the green laser sight, though, we do improve the hip fire, which is already decent for the AUG, at least for an assault rifle on the AUG, so you can try and run this with a hip fire setup. Again, the suppressor kind of counteracts the hip fire ability, but if you want to go stealthy in close quarters, which is unbelievably useful, keep yourself off of that mini-map, then the suppressor is going to work out well. And despite having a lot of attachments that don't necessarily complement the AUG A3, I was still able to do incredibly well, and a lot of that is just due to the suppressor. It's one of those things where so many people, or at least the good players, play off of the mini-map. You're watching that mini-map all the time, trying to figure out where your enemies are. It is such an unbelievably useful and probably overpowered to a certain extent tool that a lot of really good players use, and if you keep yourself off of the minimap, then you're going to go unnoticed by a big percentage of the enemy team. This is something to keep in mind when thinking about the new Battlefield game as well, since shooting unsuppressed weapons, as there are no suppressed weapons in World War I, is going to keep you off the minimap. So you're no longer going to ping your character on the minimap every time you fire a gun in Battlefield 1, which changes things up pretty drastically in terms of how much you're going to rely on that minimap for locating your enemies. And I really like this. I'm a fan of any game that requires you to rely more on your senses, your sight and sound senses, to locate your enemies versus just using sort of UI tools that are like, hey, that guy's like 10 meters in front of you, or he's behind this wall. That sort of stuff, it doesn't interest me as much. I love being more reliant on just what I see and hear. I think that's more skill-based, and it's just more enjoyable for me personally. Now, one of the reasons that the ACOG is not necessarily an ideal choice for the AUG A3, aside from the spread mechanics and stuff in Battlefield 4, making an ACOG a little bit overkill for most accurate shooting, is the fact that the AUG A3, because it's supposed to be better at hipfire, doesn't have the best aiming down sight accuracy. It's not terrible, but it's not going to start off with good ADS accuracy. So it makes using a magnified optic seem a little bit pointless at times. In fact, the zoom is so good that you can see just how far your shots are missing, even when you're aiming perfectly on target, because of the bloom factors, the spread factors in Battlefield 4. And as much as I tried to take advantage of the suppressed and stealthy qualities of this weapon on this rush game here, my team was not able to take either of these first two MCOMs. This is a tricky map to push up on, and especially if there's 64 players and tanks involved, and I'm locked into one class that's very specific when it comes to its role and its purpose, there's not a whole lot I can do. So rush games can be fun, but if you don't got the team to back you up, it's kind of pointless to play them. And a lot of people say that I really like to play TDM the most in Battlefield 4. I just think TDM is one of the better places to get gameplay footage when it comes to pure kills and stuff like that for a weapon loadout. So it makes a lot of sense to use loadouts in team deathmatch style maps, because if you're playing rush and I'm playing like an assault class and the enemy team's just wrecking with tanks, there's not a lot I can do in that situation. I'm sort of locked into one specific loadout, one specific class, where I don't have as much flexibility to change classes to adapt to whatever situation that I might be faced with in a rush game. Whereas in team deathmatch, if I'm playing an assault class, then I'm pretty much good to go. I don't need to think about switching up or changing my playstyle. I can just kind of keep fighting in TDM. And so that's one of the reasons why I tend not to use loadouts during rush games as much, unless one is specifically designed for a very specific role during rush, and I'm not necessarily supposed to be the guy on the MCOM or capturing the points. Then I can maybe make it work a little bit better. But those are always more challenging loadouts because they're more dependent on the balance of the game rather than the quality of the loadout. Now, ever since Siege of Shanghai TDM has had elevator and roof access revoked, this map has become much more balanced and much more enjoyable. Before, I don't know how many people were playing this game at launch or remember what this map was like when the game first came out, but you could get up on the roofs of this shopping mall and it made one side of the map completely imbalanced, and it was so easy just to get up on the roofs, and all you had to do is hold down the elevator and ladder and you could just snipe people from on the roofs or wreck them from above. And there wasn't a whole lot the enemy team could do aside from trying to get out mortars. The fighting dynamic on this map was terrible at the start, but now that they've removed that rooftop access and restricted basically something that was ruining this map, it's become quite fun, and the layout itself is something that I enjoy a lot. That's always been a challenge of Battlefield games, since their TDM maps are not handcrafted for team deathmatch. They might move around a few containers here and there for the TDM versions of the map, but they're usually just little cutouts of much larger maps that are designed with a much bigger game flow in mind. So TDM's really sort of trying to make a game mode work on a map that wasn't initially designed for it, and thus it suffers a lot. It suffers a lot from map design specifically. Battlefield 1 is still moving forward with the same practice as all Battlefield games have in the past. We'll have to see if they take a better approach approach or a more balanced approach to it. I think Battlefield 4 kind of had a bit of a slip up when it came to its overall map design philosophy, and that hopefully they're getting back on track when it comes to Battlefield 1. I actually really like the Scar map. I think it's well laid out. The domination mode of it seems like it's an okay layout, although it's not that much fun to play domination on Battlefield 1, but we'll have to wait and see what comes of the smaller infantry-oriented game modes in that game. I feel like we'll be seeing a lot of Golmud Railway TDM style maps in Battlefield 1, since there's a lot more smaller buildings in the Scar map with multiple stories to them and lots of destruction. I think this would be a good thing. I think Golmud Railway TDM is a great map, provided that you don't run it too long and every building gets destroyed till it turns into sort of just a flat map. Anyway, that wraps it up for this episode of Loadout. I like the AUG A3. It's a great gun, but these attachments don't necessarily work well with it. A red dot and a naked AUG or whatever foregrip of your choice would be a much better setup. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is LevelCap signing off.